We are live.
Morning. Forgive the late start of our meeting. We are having had some technical difficulties that prevents Commissioner Winningham to be with us, although she has tried. We're working on that. Nevertheless, we have a quorum with Commissioners Caraballos and Commissioner Ayers and myself. So we're prepared to begin, and hopefully Commissioner Winningham will join us shortly. Commissioner Cardozo is, as a personal matter today, I contacted him and he sends the following message. Good luck today. I would remind everyone that the chairs of high-level agencies should also be subject to the same review as high-level elected officials, and there are lots of other issues in addition to outside activity requests we should be focusing on. So with that,
Let me just make a statement. Commissioner Winningham, when she is able to log in, will be participating in the meeting pursuant to POL 103-A of the Commission rules and regulations there under governing participation remotely in exceptional circumstances.
thank you. So that being the case, the purpose of our meeting today is to begin our deliberations with regard to the issues of guidance and the interplay between staff and the commission. I think an opening comment is appropriate, and that is that in the short time that I've had the privilege of serving on this commission, I have been nothing short of astonished at the dedication, hard work, and continual good humor of the staff that we have had throughout. We are learning the ropes yet in terms of how to rebuild a commission that was badly flawed. The staff has been wonderful in helping us along as we sometimes take baby steps, sometimes wrong steps, but always working with us in a sense of collaboration to accomplish everything that needs to be accomplished. Much of what we're going to be doing is not only reaffirming, obviously, what the legislature gave us with regard to our obligation, with regard to guidance and the like, but also in terms of our role in the overall picture and how that all works. So with that preface, our goal today is to discuss and consider what our role is and the role of staff and how we intersect that with that in terms of Executive Law Section 94 sub 7. I've asked our executive director to to address that initially as we begin our discussion.
Yes. Let me say at a prior meeting, staff prepared a proposed resolution which had been discussed by the commission, which outlines the procedures both under Section 94.7A with respect to the obligation of the commission and of staff to provide informal guidance to anyone within the commission's jurisdiction, setting aside members of the legislature and legislative employees who comes to the commission seeking informal guidance from the commission, as well as applications for approval to participate, engage in outside activities under 19 NYCRR Part 932. As we interpret the statute, that's subsection or subdivision 7 and 3 subsections of that subdivision. The allocation, the first instance, is to staff, which provides guidance through guidance unit, both for lobbying inquiries and for ethics inquiries. That guidance is confidential. That guidance is entitled to weight and reliance on those who receive it. And under subsection 7C, the commission has the authority to provide formal guidance in the form of formal advisory opinions, whether with notice of comment or otherwise. And we've proposed a system where staff would as historically it has been the case since the State Ethics Commission, going back to 1987. Formal guidance is provided by staff. Commission has the ability at any time to modify that guidance through formal advisory opinions. Indicated, and we have in at least one instance stated that the commission can supersede informal guidance provided by staff. At its next meeting following the rendition of guidance. But I understand there's a debate now about whether should be some other division of or way of treating those who come to the commission for guidance or outside activity.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. I note Commissioner Whittingham is with us. Commissioner, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Now we can hear you. Welcome.
Perfect.
Okay, good. I know one of the discussions that we had initially at our last meeting was 7A of Section 94 with regard to how it is to be read and interpreted. I know Commissioner Ayers had a different, and Commissioner Caraballos had a different reading of that section. Would either of you like to address that?
Sure. Okay, I'll go first. Sorry, first of all, can everybody hear me okay? I feel I need to check.
No, you're good.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I don't know. I've looked at this section a lot, and I just can't figure out how to read it to mean that it has to be staff that gives the informal guidance. It seems to me that, I mean, the sentence that we're looking at seems to me quite clearly to have a single subject and two verbs. The commission shall establish a unit or units solely for ethics and lobbying guidance and give such prompt informal advice. So it seems very clear to me that unit or units is not the subject of the verb give. The commission is the subject of the verb give, and the commission is used elsewhere in the statute to mean the members of the commission. Of course, that can be delegated to staff, and maybe it should be. But I just can't see how to read it to require that it be staff. And even if it did require it to be staff, I'm not sure why the commission couldn't require that it be run past the commission members before staff act. I understand the need to be prompt, but that seems to me a separate question from who can do it. So I guess I'm asking for a little more. Am I wrong about the way that sentence reads? Am I? Where is the mismatch here?
Yeah, if I may, just to clarify, going all the way back to the New York State Ethics Commission, which was first New York State ethics enforcement. There were other mechanisms for enforcement to public officers. As by the
Sorry, Sandy, it's not easy to hear you. I don't know if you could move the microphone any closer to where you are.
I don't have that
Oh,
power.
you can't. It's in the ceiling. I'm sorry.
I can elevate.
I'm sorry.
Probably too late to do much about that. But I'll try to speak up. Going all the way back to the State Ethics Commission, the arrangement through delegation, because we didn't have this provision at that time. Specificity of a staff unit. The convention came into being and is codified now in ECRA. But the mechanism that had been used by the Ethics Commission, Commission on Public Integrity, and by JCO was to draw a distinction between informal guidance, which is rendered by staff, and it's of value to the recipient of that guidance, who can rely on it, unless and until changed by the commissioners or modified by the commissioners. It has no precedential value. So it's strictly guidance, and that's why it's informal guidance. It's given to the individual. And it doesn't have the formal imprimatur of the commission. It is required and expected to be based on commission precedent and accepted by the commission interpretations of the relevant law, including the case law, but also the positive law and the statutes. And that's distinguished from the power of commissioners to render advisory opinions that have only the effect that an agency's interpretations of its governing statutes and the statutes that it enforces has. And that's been the acknowledged distinction since at least the time of the Ethics Commission, starting with the original delegation of informal guidance. There has never, to my knowledge, and there may be some exception, but I'm not aware of it, ever been an instance in which the power to render advisory opinions has been delegated to staff. That has always been retained by the commissioners, understandably and properly. I think it's a proper interpretation of the statute. What ECRA does is codify and formalize that distinction, the distinction between informal guidance rendered by staff through a staff unit. And you'll note there's a limitation on its applicability in sub B that's different from the weight that's given to an advisory opinion, a formal opinion rendered by the commissioners. Throughout this history, the commissioners have always had the prerogative and the power and the authority to disagree with staff through a formal advisory opinion or to change the precedent and establish a different interpretation or application of the rules that staff applies. So in contradistinction to the prior statutes, we now have a statute that very specifically codifies this institution called informal guidance. And the concept of a commissioners formally at a meeting rendering informal guidance is a difficult one conceptually, at least from my perspective.
Okay.
So I see nothing to support that in the case law.
Commissioner, let me Aravalos a moment. She had raised her hand also.
So, I'm looking at the whole, the whole section 94. And so the preceding section talks about the executive director and commission staff. And in that section, it says the commission shall do certain things and the commission may do certain things. And then we go to 7, which is the advice and guidance part. And the same way Ava interprets the statute I do, which is it's, you have a comma, either however you want to call it, one subject and 2 verbs, or a comma that you would do a full stop and then start the sentence again. So in both instances, it would be the commission shall give such prompt informal advice to persons. And I think ultimately, the way the statute reads, it is the commission's work that the staff is doing. And I think I put it better, I think, in my email. And so ultimately, I read the responsibility to remain with the commission. And the commission can delegate as much as it wants and as little as it wants. And it can put certain guidelines within what they delegate. So what I was proposing during the meeting is, all right, we'll do prompt advice and guidance when it comes to all of the state officials under the commission's jurisdiction, except for these maybe 1 or 2 categories, and I think that's debatable whether it's just elected officials and heads of state or just elected officials. So
Head of state departments.
Head of state departments, right? And so, I think the question for me will be, how much does this, I understand your issue is that you believe that the statute reads and it gives the staff that power and not the commission. I don't read it that way. I think I read it very differently. And I'm trying to, and the other part of this is when we're talking about the recommendations from Holt and Lavelle, the question is about outside activity, and somehow in the response, in the proposed response, it's mixed also in with the 931.5, is it 931.5? The statute. 932.5, sorry, thank you.
That's something.
So, and it seems to all be lumped together. And I think we need to take those things a little separately. And I'd like to kind of understand why would this be such an issue for the staff? Why, how much, I don't think it interferes. So are you saying it interferes with your ability to give prompt advice, whatever that means? Because there are ways we can address that. Is that the issue? What's the issue for the staff?
It's not, I don't think it's a question of timing. Staff has been studious in informing commissioners of requests received across the board that are going to generate informal guidance, letters. And we time things so the commission is aware before staff fulfills its obligation to provide informal guidance. So if commissioners wish to weigh in or have questions about a particular request or staff's interpretation, there's ample opportunity to discuss that.
All right.
And we're willing, we do that monthly in connection with me, or less monthly. How many weeks there are in a given month. And we're prepared to do that more frequently if that's something that would be helpful to commissioners.
I would note for the record that we have been now getting monthly statements and even more frequently color-coded so that we are aware of what's going on a fairly contemporaneous basis. I do note that our chair, Brett Davey, is present, and he would like to make a comment and ask a question. Chairman?
Thank you, Commissioner, Vice Chair Austin. And I'm joining this meeting as an ex officio member, just for the record. So I am inclined to agree with Commissioner Ayers and Carballo, but with a caveat. And the caveat is that I also agree with the precedent that that Executive Director Berlin has stated about sort of the ways in which informal guidance have been given and provided over time. I think it both defies common sense and is consistent with the interpretation of Commissioners Ayers and Carballo to say that the commission as a commission cannot delegate, that there are some areas where staff has prerogatives that the commission has no oversight of or cannot address or cannot delegate or change in some way. The issue, as I recall from our last meeting, was there seemed to be some sense that there was an interpretation of the statutes that have just been addressed that said that for the commission not to give staff, or for staff to say it another way, that staff by that statute has the authority to issue informal guidance, and any impinging on that by the commission itself, somehow it contravenes the statute. I think Commissioner Carballo and Commissioner Ayers are saying that is not the case. I think I agree with that. And I think it only makes sense that that would be the case. But having said that, I do think that staff should issue informal guidance as they've done. And and that so issue informal guidance generally, particularly where there's precedent. And to complicate this even more, I do accept the idea that there should be special consideration given to statewide electeds and agency heads. For me, it would be only in the case where there is no precedent. So in other words, staff would continue to give informal guidance across the board to everyone except statewide elected officials and agency heads when there is when they are setting new precedent, when there is no precedent. So bottom line is, I agree with my commissioners on the interpretation of the statute. I agree with Executive Director Berlin on the notion of staff providing informal guidance. I agree with the notion that when it comes to statewide electeds and agency heads, special consideration should be given even to informal guidance when there is no precedent. And I would hope that that would provide some framework for us to move forward.
Mr. Vice Chair, could I get in the queue?
If I may just, and hopefully you'll be able to answer this also, Commissioner Ayers, and just a short comment. If you look at section C, subsection C of 94.7, it talks about the commission also rendering on written request or on its own initiative advisory opinions and allow public comment, etc. It would seem to me that, in the context, the legislature intended for the units to be doing the primary work and the commission in A, and the commission doing its oversight work and jumping in where it thinks it's necessary under subparagraph C. I think that's a fair interpretation, since the rules of statutory interpretation would cause the entire section to be read as a whole. Commissioner Ayers, thank you for your patience.
Oh, no, thank you. My response to that would just be that the problem is that the same word commission is used for both. And the same principle of statutory interpretation says the same word generally means the same thing in different places in the statute. If the commission may also do something, then it must be the commission that did the other thing. But the other, I wanted to say I'm grateful for Executive Director Berlin's comments, because I think they did help me understand his position better. It sounded to me like the basis for your view actually has more to do with the word informal, and your sense that when the legislature used that word, it was doing so in light of a custom or practice that understood that there's sort of an animal out there in the world called an informal opinion, and that animal is born from staff, not born from commissioners. And that we should interpret the statute in light of a custom that the legislature was likely to be aware of. And I'm grateful for that, because I feel like if I'm understanding you correctly, that does seem to me like a plausible basis for the view. That said, I have to say I'm still not convinced. And the reason I'm not convinced is that I think this is consistent with what Chair Davey was saying. The text is still fairly clear that the commission shall give it. So even if it were true that informal guidance is something that comes from the staff, the statute doesn't say that. And this is what I think Chair Davey was saying. It's very difficult for me to believe that in light of what prompted the abolition of JCOPE and the establishment of this agency, it's hard for me to imagine that the legislature wanted to specifically take away the commission's ability. New York, you've disappeared. I now see.
Yep, they're gone.
I now see a white circle with a vague silhouette of a.
Yes. Can you see us yet?
Actually, that we can hear them.
We
So
can
why
hear
don't
them,
do
right?
that?
We just can't, the camera went off.
Line, so
Well, that's all right. I don't need to see you. If just promise if you're making any terribly funny faces, you'll tell me. Well, anyway, the point I was making was just that I find it difficult to imagine that the legislature wanted to restrict the commission's ability to get involved specifically with outside activities requests, and that they would have, in that if they had wanted that, they would have left the statute reading the other way. But I had so my question, I guess, for Executive Director Berland or anyone on the staff is, it seems to me that there's a second distinction between informal guidance and advisory opinions, and tell me if I'm wrong. Oh, now you are a scrambled visual single. I'll stop commenting on what I'm seeing, and I'll just assume you can still hear me.
We're obviously troubled by your remarks.
Yeah.
You turned into a bunch of static, which is quite a trick.
You just view it as your first warning.
Yeah, I mean,
Right. Wait, Sandy, let me just finish the question.
Oh, okay.
The question is, the question is, would I be right in understanding that a second distinction between informal guidance and advisory opinions is that advisory opinions have to be given to the public or have to be shared in some way that informal guidance isn't? In other words, informal guidance can be something a person says to you over the telephone, whereas advisory opinion is a written document that has to be published and goes up on the website. Because if that's true, then that seems to me sort of to another really important reason why there has to be some ability for the commission to get commission members, the commission itself, to get involved with informal guidance, because otherwise we couldn't get involved in confidential requests. If there's a choice made for whatever reason, which I think there can be, to only communicate things informally, which I think is a very good thing. We should be encouraging folks to do that, to ask for that. Then I think staff's interpretation would preclude commission involvement in over the phone advice, and that seems to me an unacceptable consequence. But I'm asking if that reading is consistent with Director Berland's reading.
Yeah, let me sort of take it in reverse. Formal guidance in statute is now specific. It was not specific in the past. Does not require. It can be accompanied, and sometimes it is. Have you lost us? Are we there? Can you hear me?
No, I still hear you, but I didn't hear the key word. It can. Could you just say that last sentence again?
Formal advisory opinions can be rendered with or without public notice and comment. They are published. They are typically based upon specific fact patterns,
Okay.
but because of confidentiality, identifying information is redacted from them before they are published. At least the custom.
Yeah,
of
but
this.
if it's a statewide elected official.
Well.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, I mean, it may or may not be an effective tool in blinding the identity of the individual in some instances, but nonetheless, if you look through the advisory opinions that sort of are carried behind us statutorily, the 350 or 400 such opinions, identifying information is removed from them before they're formally published. So that's how confidentiality is addressed. And I suppose the same thing if we're notice and comment prior to the rendition of formal advisory opinion by the commission. I think the question of what commission means in the statute is one that's been kicked around a long time. Does it mean the entity with all of its staff and commissioners and other attributes, or does it mean only the commissioners? And of course, the definitional section in the statute is not very helpful. I don't think there's anything that's particularly helpful in general rules of construction to clarify that.
Right.
And it's been an ongoing thing. I can only say that I agree with you that in enacting ECRA, legislature, vast persons of this statute unquestionably were aware of the long history treatment of guidance and made, as evident by the fact that they recast the way guidance is addressed. Prior statutes didn't draw this distinction between informal and formal guidance. Here it's very specifically called out. Prior statutes didn't specifically call for a unit, which necessarily is a staff unit. I don't think, notwithstanding
Yeah.
about grammar, diction, or enjambment, and the use of commas in the provision. I think it's clearly a staff unit that's contemplated.
Oh, yeah. No, completely agree.
Counterintuitive. And very difficult to read the statute as calling for a unit of commissioners. I've never seen that in any statute.
No, nobody thinks that.
It's staff, and there is no history. I guess one could make an argument, I'm not sure what it would be based on, that for the first time here, the legislature either called for or is permitting this commission to decide that informal guidance, at least for some individuals, will be rendered by commissioners and not by professional ethics staff. But I don't think that's really a plausible or reasonable.
But Sandy, you're not setting up. That's not a fair way to set up the question. I mean, the way you've just stated the question, rendered by commissioners and not by professional ethics staff, nobody thinks that's what we should do.
Nobody wants to do.
The idea is that the commission would be involved in and would participate in the decision, but I don't think anybody wants to replace the staff's role. And I don't think the statute would be sympathetic to that either. Just as you say, the unit clearly means staff, but commission doesn't mean staff. It may mean only commission members, or it may mean everybody, including commission members. I think both of those readings are plausible. I agree. But it is the commission that shall give informal guidance, not the units in the sentence. And so I guess my view is I think we should move past this discussion of whether the statute allows the commission to be involved and move forward into the discussion of whether it's a good idea. Now, the historical practice you're talking about maybe existed for good reasons and we shouldn't get involved. And I'm totally open to that idea too. But I just don't see, I don't think it's fair to characterize my interpretation of the statute or anybody else's as the commission should replace the staff. The commission should have an opportunity to review the guidance before it issues, I think is the maximal position in the other direction.
I would tend to agree with that. I don't think that the role of commissioner was ever for any of us to do. Commissioner Chairman Davey?
Yes, I'm going to just quickly here. I'm going to repeat myself. I would agree again. I think with Commissioner Ayers that it can't be interpreted that the commission would not have the authority to create these units and delegate responsibility, or choose to sort of pursue these informal, offer informal advice itself, even if that's completely impractical. But I think what's being suggested here is that the commission should establish a unit to provide this advice, informal and formal, but the commission never gives up its authority to affect that in any respect. That said, I'm going to go back to, and I agree with the need to move on, to say that as a practical matter and consistent with the statute, the proposals that have been made about staff continuing to give informal guidance, particularly where there's precedent, coming to the commission for statewide and agency heads when there's no precedent, and then all formal guidance coming from the commission. I think those are things that we should move forward on, determine a way to codify or memorialize, and then get on with the business of the people of the state of New York. So, and then if we need some kind of external ruling or interpretation for what seems may be a disagreement on how to understand a particular piece of the statute, then let's determine how to do that. But in terms of doing the business of the people of the state, I think we have a couple of commissioners who provided us a framework for doing that, pieces of which I've articulated, and I would just encourage us to move ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner Whittingham.
Commissioner Whittingham, do you have something?
No, I'm fine. We can move on. I think it is clear the crux of the matter is whether or not we, by us rendering that informal opinion, we are infringing on staff authority and going against the statute, which was clearly what staff interpretation of the statute was said to be. I think we have repeatedly said, I think every commission prior to today and today is saying we don't agree with that reading of it, and we can move on now. Where I disagree with Chair Davey is whether or not, if there is precedent, that the staff should continue to give those informal opinion without the involvement of the commission. I believe if it's a agency head or a statewide official, regardless of what it is, that there should be some oversight by the commissioners. If there's precedent, still, I think the commissioners should still see it. If there's no precedent, the staff will analyze it, take it to the commissioners, and the commissioners make a decision, regardless of whether it's formal or it's an advisory opinion.
All right, if I could sum up.
No, I agree with Commissioner Whittingham just stated.
I think we're all on the same page, so if I can just sum it up and make sure that I'm correct. The concept is that notwithstanding how 94.7A could be read, that it is recognized that I would say impossible for us to review every single informal opinion that's given, and that we have a system in place that we may want to tweak a bit, but probably not, where that which is precedent is no new precedent, that it would be just continued in the same manner by our delegation to the staff, which has been doing a fine job with that, and that when we're dealing with a certain level of state employee or office holder at a level that we will discuss, that would be something that would be brought to us to determine whether, just to look at the precedent, make a determination as to whether or not we want to address it, or in situations where there is no precedent, obviously we would have to address that. Is that a fair statement that everybody is comfortable with?
I would just say I would yield and accept, although I don't necessarily agree with it, but just so that we can get on with our, with what we've been charged to do, I would accept when we get to a formal vote on this, the idea of, although I do think it's going to prove to be impractical, but again, so that we can move on, I accept the idea of reviewing informal opinions for statewide electeds and maybe some agency heads. And maybe we can do that for a time and see how it goes. I think it's unnecessary, but I would accept that. But yeah, generally, I think what you have said, Vice Chair, at least as I understand it, is where I think we are.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I do want to.
Mr. Vice Chair,
So,
can I get in the queue?
You're next.
so I just want to.
Oh, okay.
Earlier, I just want to clarify. So, right now, all we're talking about is informal, confidential opinions. Is that right? Because it seems to be lumped all together in the response to the recommendations, meaning that it looks like there's a procedure other than the procedures set for the 932.5 and 932.6 for outside activity requests. Is that correct? Is that how outside activity requests are now being handled by the staff if there's precedent? Is that correct? Or is it coming, or certain requests coming to the commission?
So that, outside activity approval requests governed by Part 932 are being handled by staff in the ordinary course, and we're following the procedures that we talked about, where staff is including the 932 approval requests in the log guidance requests.
All right, so
that we
there's
provide to
no
the commission. So
question,
they're in there along with all the other guidance.
so there's no
requests.
question, but that is a commission responsibility that is delegated. Is there any question about that? At 932, those questions are commission, that we are authorized to weigh in on those, and the statute does contemplate us weighing in on those.
The Part 932 doesn't specify who, other than the commission, is receiving those requests and acting on them. So, we have the additional gloss, 994-7A, and we're considering, we're considering the 932 outside activity requests to be in that bucket.
And you're talking about that in terms of like an informal opinion as well. But I think if 932.6 gives specific procedures for those outside requests. And if I understand, and I might be wrong, that it seems that these requests are being taken on a verbal basis, not a formal, no? The outside
activity requests?
Yeah.
No, outside activity requests.
Those are all written.
They are all written.
Okay.
All outside activity requests that we get from policymakers. We get all outside activity requests that come from policymakers that have already been approved by their agency and that fit a certain criteria that is outlined in 932.6. Yes. Sorry, 5.
I just wanted to make sure that.
So all of that is written.
And those are not.
That is-
informal, okay.
No, that is.
No,
It's
but
still.
is it informal, just the.
Informal guidance just means that there's a precedent for it, and so the commission does not need to make new law. A formal advisory opinion is in essence new law, in a sense, right? That's made by the commission. Outside activity requests are a very specified, this is what they intend to do, this is what they have to be, this is the information they have to show before we can review it and approve or deny.
But
So I wanted
they are determined with the same informal letter opinion that you would see for somebody asking if they could take a particular job after retiring from state
My concern is, I didn't see, and I don't know whether it's true or not, whether we received actual contracts or proposals, for some of the activities, outside activities that we have considered. I don't know if we're getting everything that you have, or we're just getting a memo. And so that's a question for me as well. So,
That is addressed. That is addressed.
If I may sort of interject here, I apologize. If I may, this is St. John, if I might interject to hopefully clarify the response to Commissioner Caraballo's question. I think it needs to be understood that when the staff renders informal advice in response to a request for approval of an outside activity pursuant to the process that's laid out in the regulations, if the issues that are presented to us with respect to our staff analysis of the proposed outside activity, if the activity and the issues related thereto are issues that have already been decided by this commission or its predecessor agencies, then staff proceeds to render that advice. But anytime issues arise, as staff analyzes a request for approval of outside activity, if the issues that are raised are novel, if the activity that is proposed raises issues that the commission, either at the staff level or the commissioner level, has not opined on, then that becomes the province of the full commission and its commissioners to rule on. But again, directly to Commissioner Caraballo's point, the informal opinions that are rendered routinely by staff so far, all of that work is done because it is our determination that there is precedent for making the approval based upon existing advisory opinions that are consistent with the informals that we've rendered as well.
You have a
So
category for a close question? Do you have a category for close questions as to how those are handled? Maybe it fits 3 out of the 4 and there's a particular twist in fact or whatever.
I mean, generally, I think we can say that if we get a question that we have not had before, doesn't fit into the existing precedent, we would generally bring it to the commission. I also want to just make sure that it's clear.
Correct.
Informal guidance is not just a phone call. Informal guidance, most of our work is informal letter guidance. And it falls into different buckets. So there's the outside activity request. There is what we generally call requests from people who are about to leave state service and they want to understand how the post-employment restrictions affect them. And so those all fit into the category of informal guidance. We get routine conflict of interest queries that, if it is very detailed, that may be a letter of opinion as well. But again, that is all falls under informal guidance. Formal advisory opinions, which absolutely go to the full commission to, staff prepares a formal advisory that the commission then votes on, is something that is a novel question, whether it is a small fact, whether it is a small change from existing precedent or a completely novel idea that we've never seen before. And that all falls under formal advisory.
And it can be understood, these are not all granted. There are denials as well.
Right.
There are instances in which the requester they ask the full commission to take up a question where they disagree
With what the staff has said.
Staff's
And that's happened,
determination that,
right.
that the answer is in the negative.
So that's happened before where, staff has denied an outside activity request or has said that they are not allowed to take, X job once they leave state service because they're.
I looked at them and
Right.
I thought you guys did a very great job with it and a very fair job. But I do still believe that we commissioned this Hogan Lavelle's report. I understand your position that came before ECRA was actually written and formed, but nonetheless, I want us to go with that recommendation with respect to this certain class of people who fall under our jurisdiction. And we talked about it a lot already. I'm not getting, I'd like to understand if there's something that's gonna affect your work so dramatically with this class of individuals. We're not asking to look at all of them, whether there's precedent or not. I think with respect to elected statewide officials and agency heads, whether there's precedent or not, my motion is, or my recommendation is that it comes to the commission, and we will, to the extent that it is a timeliness issue, I think that we can accommodate what's needed. That's I mean, that we spent a lot of time on this already. I think there is, and I do understand your position, and I know you guys are doing a great job, and I know that you guys are the experts on this. But I believe that this whole commission was reinvented with the idea that we're going to do things a little differently, and I want to.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point.
Yeah.
Staff is not asserting a power or an authority. What staff is saying is that under the statute, it has a duty and an obligation, and applicants for informal guidance are
And we
Yeah,
disagree,
yeah,
so we
yeah.
need to win that, right?
I don't talk about, I don't want to get into vested rights or not.
Right.
But they believe they have a right to hear from staff.
And I think
That's-
Of course, we want to
Okay,
know,
okay.
yeah.
I
how
think
we
the
do it.
question and Commissioner Camillo brought about kind of the coming question, and that is who fits into which category, which was in part what we were going to be discussing today. Commissioner Ayers has been very patient.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to, in terms of sorting out the questions, it seems to me like there's two separate issues, one of which is there some category of cases in addition to the cases without precedent that you've described where the commission wants to adopt a procedure similar to or maybe different from the procedure that currently exists for those cases of first impression? And then the second question would be, so one question is, are there a category of cases where we want a different procedure? And then what would the different procedure be? So I just wanted to, so it's been very helpful, the explanation of how cases that are, let's just call them new cases for short, or novel cases. It's been helpful to hear how novel cases work, because it seems like one option would be we have novel cases plus all cases involving X category of whatever follow that track. So we could just slot those other cases right into the same process that we now use for novel cases. But another option, which my sense is we've been doing, is we don't necessarily slot this new category, let's call it statewide plus, whatever it is, because people may have different views on that, but whatever it is, we don't adopt an absolute rule that says, oh, we're always going to, and to refer statewides to the full commission in the same way that we do for novel cases. And there might be good reason for us not to just adopt the same process that we use for novel cases. I'm thinking of our desire to incentivize statewides and electeds and everybody else to fully avail themselves of informal procedures without fearing that the full commission debate will prompt public revelation of whatever it is that they're struggling with. That seems concerning to me. And so it seems to me that there's an alternative option, which is rather than just treating all of these, whatever the other category is, and by the way, I think identifying what goes into that category is actually the easy part, once we decide that it exists. I think that the challenging thing for me is how do we make sure that whatever else is in that category, we don't discourage people from coming to us for advice, we don't mess up staff's ability to promptly and reasonably respond. And so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like what's been happening now is you just alert us when a case comes in. Even if you think that it's governed by precedent, like if something is of high public interest, or, I think of it in terms of our mission. Our mission is to restore public trust. Some cases, by virtue of their prominence, by virtue of whatever, I don't know, staff knows much better than me, but some cases are likely to be a factor. When people look back on our work and say, how's public trust in government in New York? They're going to care about statewide elected officials' conduct plus some other stuff. But I think of it as if you just do what I think you've been doing, which is, email all of us, which gives all of us an opportunity to write in and say, hey, I know you think this is governed by precedent, but I think that precedent was wrong, right? Or I think that precedent was troubling, or I think you're wrong that it was governed by precedent. Then now staff is aware that there's a live issue that the commission maybe is interested in. And I don't see any reason why we have to necessarily move to a full advisory opinion, as opposed to let's just chat at our next meeting, right? I'm fully confident that if 3 commissioners say I strongly disagree with what staff wants to do here, and 3 say I strongly agree with what staff wants to do, that we can have an adult discussion and figure out what the best course of action is without locking ourselves in to a formal advisory opinion every time a statewide comes to us with a request, that's or whatever other category. So I guess my suggestion would be, and I this is in the email that I circulated before, or a fair, sort of very rough stab at it, was some sort of process where staff flag things for the commissioners when they come in, and commissioners then have an opportunity to request a discussion at the next full commission meeting. I think we would, if that was the process, we'd have to understand that we really do have an obligation to deliver prompt guidance. And so it can't be like at the next commission meeting, we're all going to weigh in and say, maybe we'll come to the next meeting with a draft. You know, that's not what that's going to look like. So I recognize this process may be rough and may not make any sense, but my overall point is, I think we identify the high significance cases, and I also think that we should stay flexible as to our process so that we don't lock ourselves into a formal thing for that necessarily. But I do think it's essential, and I agree with Commissioner Caraballo on this, that I do think it's essential that the full commission be advised as to requests that come in from statewide. I'm sure most of them will be easily addressed by staff, and we'll all agree with how that works, but I think we should be in the loop. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Whittingham.
Thank you. Just want to say a few things. I want us to make sure we don't lose sight of the issue and we stay very clear. I heard the mention that, the requests aren't always granted. I do not believe anyone on this call, as previously stated, they were always granted. So it's not an issue of whether or not the request is granted. So let's clarify that and don't cloud the issue. I also want to say that, with the executive director's point that staff has a duty and obligation, any duty and obligation staff has, the commissioner has it as well, because it's a commission as a whole. It's not just staff or just the commissioners. It's a commission as a whole. So we all have that duty and obligation to render prompt advice. And we can do so together. It doesn't mean if we are working collaboratively, it's not going to be prompt, and that's staff's duty and not the duty of the commissioners as well. So those are two things I want us to just be clear on and not lose sight of the issue. Now, I disagree with Commissioner Ayers, who says, let's continue to do what staff has been doing. That's awesome. But what staff has been doing is not the policy. So let's make it clear what the policy is so that perhaps, 4 years from now, we're not just saying, oh, this has been historically what it's been done, but it's not clearly what the policy is. My position is, if there's no precedent, regardless of what it is, it goes to the commissioners. If there is precedent, the staff will handle it with the clear exception for agency heads and statewide officials. And that is regardless of whether it's an informal opinion, a formal one, which is only the commissioners can do it. That's not lost on me, or if it's outside activity. But whatever it is, if those individuals if it's something routine, that simply means we're not going to take 3 days and have 100 emails. We will do that quickly. So it shouldn't be such burden or burdensome on us. I have previously mentioned, let's do a commissioner for the week. Not a popular idea. Nobody likes it. That's okay. But we can't delegate. I don't believe certain things we should delegate. And my position, if it's the head, the state agency head, or a statewide official, that it always comes to the commission before it goes out. And I do not believe that delays the process, or that we are, not doing what we're obligated to do.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a quick question?
Sure, please.
For either, or I guess it's for Commissioner Whittingham. When it comes to informal advice or advisory opinions that for statewide and let's say agency heads that we want to be prompt, that the full commission has to consider, how would you envision that working?
Well, if the staff, as soon as the staff receives it, it notifies the commission immediately. That is it. And then the commissioners, after they've prepared their memo or their opinion, it's given to the commissions immediately. And then the commissioners will say, and we call a meeting if it's necessary for us to do that, or we review it. If we don't have to call a meeting and we have no opposition to it, then we'll let that be known. But before it goes out, I just want it to come to the full commission. That's simply it.
So just to play this out a little bit more, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So then that would mean if no commissioner objected to the informal advisory opinion that staff planned to issue, it would just go out. If they
Correct.
didn't hear from any of us, one way or the other, they'd send it to us, FYI. But if there's an objection, then the opinion would be delayed until either we could call a special meeting or until the next meeting. Is that the idea?
Then we will put in place, we'll call a special meeting.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, I see trouble with that is means we'd all have to run to Albany or to New York City to resolve a particular issue. I'm not sure if that's really what the law suggested or would want. And I'm not sure that's really what the role of the commissioner is. The whole precedent of, the whole idea of precedent is that we give advice to individuals. They can rely on it, and then we can review that determination and say, in the future, don't do that, or this is what we want. Therefore, the person who got the advice can go forward with the advice and not have, get into trouble, since they're allowed to rely on it, but we won't quote unquote make that mistake again. And that's really the role. I know what you were trying to go for, Commissioner Whittingham, but my concern is just the logistics of the administration of the agency for us to basically be on constant call to run to New York or to Albany is a tad difficult. So I would be concerned about that. One second, and I'll turn the floor over to you, Commissioner. The other thing is I would like to see if we can resolve today who are the, obviously aside from the statewide electeds, that's easy, who are those that would fall into that must review category? Are we talking department heads of departments of a certain size? Are we talking agency heads? Are we talking heads of commissions, the size of the commissions, authorities? There are a whole different groupings of those who would be either those who would fall into the simple procedure that we've got, and there are those who would fall into the procedure of a greater review by us. And I would like to get to that, but Commissioner Whittingham.
Yes. So I just want to say, okay, we meet monthly at least once. So then there are 3 other weeks. But what I said, if everybody agrees, that means there's not an issue. But if a commissioner or multiple commissioners raise an issue, that, in my opinion, should say to us that we need to look at it. And that's what I'm talking about. Now, we are charged with reviewing the precedent, right? We haven't done so as yet. And recently, just as recent as last week, we determined that something that was precedential, we did not want to continue with in the future, right? So we haven't had that opportunity as yet to review them. Until then, we are working on all the precedent. Yes, I am aware that the statute said it's not superseded. I read it, I know. But what I am saying is we have not done that as yet. We haven't reviewed it. We're charging the statute to do so. So we're operating on a certain precedent that was. Now, if no one disagrees, or if the commissioner that raises an issue, someone can supply an answer and it's resolved there, then a meeting would not be necessary. But if it's that germane, and if it's more than one commissioner, then I believe in that instance, it's incumbent upon us to indeed address the issue and not just let it lie. And if we have a problem with that, I have suggested, why is it okay that staff will do it, but it's not okay to have a commissioner of the week? So that that commissioner would then see everything, right? And these informal that we're thinking, oh, it's too much, will then report it back to the entire commissioner or see or have some oversight. It's check and balances. That's all I'm asking for, not to do the work. And I'm just asking for that oversight. And if there's disagreement, that means there is an issue, especially if we can't resolve it by the staff answering that commissioner or one or more commissioner who may have an issue with the informal opinion.
And is your suggestion that it be that it would be for everything from the welder on a bridge working for the Department of
I have been abundantly clear, Chair.
I'm not trying to be a wise guy. I'm just, it's just for the higher ups. Okay.
Yes.
Chair Austin, I have been abundantly clear.
Okay, I want to be.
Statewide officials, agency head, I haven't deviated from that position once. That's been my position. I haven't deviated, and I don't want it to seem like, okay, I know someone made mention. So if they ask for an extension to file their SDS, should it come to the commissioners? No, let's not make light of the issue. That's not what I am saying, right? And that's not on the table. That's not an informal opinion. That's simply an extension. So that's not like belittle it to say, oh, these little things you're hanging on to. That's not what I am doing. I haven't deviated from my position of statewide officials and agency head.
Thank you. Mr. Carabello.
Mr. Vice Chair, could I get in the queue?
You're in.
So I just want to say, I understand the recommendation is that, there's a caveat in the letter that, if the commission overrides it. I know it's in all the letters, but I don't want to rely on that. I want us to make a decision on the issues that we were just discussing with that group of people under our jurisdiction, and have that be the decision. I don't think it's a good practice to give a recommendation and then turn around and have the commission override that. And we do have examples of that trying to happen, people trying to do that after the fact. And I don't think that works well, and it's not a good position for the person who's asking for that advice to be able to rely on it up to a certain point and then have it changed. And so I understand that's what you put in to kind of give the commission the right to come back and review that, but I don't think that is a satisfactory, solution to what Commissioner Whittingham and possibly Commissioner Ayers and I are saying.
Commissioner Ayers.
Thank you. So first of all, I just wanted to clarify earlier, when I said that I was open to the idea that our current practice is the kind of practice that we should keep, I strongly feel we should codify whatever we do. And I didn't mean to suggest that we should continue with an informal practice. I think we need to be clear. So I completely agree with what Commissioner Whittingham said. In terms of how we do it, I'm very, very open to the Vice Chair's concern about being prompt and the difficulty of calling a meeting. On the other hand, that procedure can't be so very unworkable because it is what we now do for cases that turn out not to be governed by precedent, right? So we're already doing that. In other words, waiting for the meeting. If we get a request, if I'm understanding correctly, even if it's an urgent request. Like, I got to decide something to do tomorrow. It sounds like the response staff gives is, I'm sorry, there's no precedent on point, and therefore we can't give you guidance today. You're going to have to make a decision, and then we'll figure out whether it was right in retrospect. Now, if that's not satisfactory, so I'm skeptical that we can't do it. I think we can do it because I think we do it. If that's not satisfactory, I think that having a process, which I think is what Commissioner Whittingham and Commissioner Karabas and I are all sort of sounds like leaning towards, where we give, instead of mandating that all requests from Statewide Plus come to us, we're endorsing circulating those requests for guidance to the commission and setting some threshold. Maybe it's one commissioner, maybe it's two, I don't know. But if some number of folks objects or expresses a desire for a full commission opinion, then it gets slotted into the same channel that we now use for presidential. I don't know. I think that seems manageable to me. Just to answer the vice chair's question, for whatever it's worth, in terms of who should fall into that category, I do think we need to be careful about how I'm a little bit nervous about limiting it to statewide and agency heads, because I do think that there are, number one, sometimes a request that comes from a lower level staff member will actually implicate the conduct of a statewide or an agency head. And we shouldn't make it possible to game the system by saying, like, oh, well, it's just my council who submitted the request, so it's not a statewide, so you all can give me guidance without going to the commission. The bigger concern is just that I think there are some, the state government is full of sort of these weird of council folks who are very high profile and have jobs that don't seem to fit into any category that anybody quite recognizes, but they circulate the office of so-and-so, the governor or the AG or the statewide. And so I think that we should be trying to craft a category that encompasses cases likely to affect the public trust. Should the conduct become public, and I think that's broader than statewide and agency heads. I admit I'm not sure how to define the category, but I do think it's broader than that. Thank you.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure I understood or just clarify, Commissioner Ayers, to the first point that you had made that, obviously we don't want people to game the system so that a request came in from a council or what have you. The request is, the request, it makes clear who the guidance is for. Right? So I just want to make sure that.
Okay, yeah.
If we're giving guidance, it is, in particular to somebody. Yes, do we get requests from ethics officers? Was they're trying to see how something would affect their workforce at large? Of course. But then that is clear. But a specific thing like an outside activity request is specific to the individual who is going to be doing that activity, or anything pertaining to a post-employment. But the guidance given is for that person is going to be engaging in that outside, post-employment. And then to the second point, I hear what you're saying. I think the concern is, to a certain extent, I don't know, I think you can make the argument then that virtually every single public employee who engages in an outside activity, all of that would, go to the public trust, right? If somebody is doing something wrong who's a state employee, right, that goes to the public trust regardless, right? And I don't want to, labor them, but there are, I don't remember the last count, about 300,000 state employees. Policymakers, I think, come into just under 40,000. And as any state employees engaging in behavior that is wrong or is making misrepresentations, that affects the public trust regardless. So I think that I think we just want to be careful. I think the distinction, obviously, when you have statewide electeds, you have 4 statewide elected officers in the state who are. I don't have a higher authority, but they report to, they are elected. They don't have somebody higher than them. Agency heads usually report to some board or commission that can remove them if necessary. and that I think is distinct from a statewide elected. You know, there are then lower department heads, there are, you know, board members. I think we should just be careful when we're putting more and more people into this category, because right, with just the, you know, statewide elected, and if you're saying just certain agency heads, okay, maybe that's a small group, but then if you're making the argument, well, it's about the public trust, well, then that's everybody. So I think you just want to be careful in how, what is this universe? The statewide electeds, like I said, make sense and are distinct from virtually every other state employee or officer in that they can't be removed by somebody else, which is distinct from agency heads or department heads.
Yeah.
Uh,
I just
Mr. Chair?
thank you for that. That was very helpful.
There a way of distinguishing them by either job responsibility, title, salary level, as Commissioner Caraballo's was thinking?
Mr. Vice Chair?
I was talking about it in terms of the on outside activity requests,
Right.
you know, what the compensation is in compared to what your salary compensation is, because I think that creates an issue just off the bat. And I see how that could be difficult, and I understand what you want is something very precise, right? That you could say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I need to ask the commissioners if they agree with this, and so that you're not in a position that you're making decisions that. And I just want to say again, Commissioner Whittingham's point, we are all working together. This is a collaborative effort. It's not, and it's not a question of trust or that we don't know that you're doing the right thing. We think, not me, I'll talk for myself, this was part of a public mandate, in my opinion, when this new commission was established, to take a look at these particular issues and things and have some oversight on them. And that's why I feel so strongly about this we call this not the committee, the proposal, the resolution. That's why I feel so strong. Yeah. So I get what you're saying. So we need to figure out. I think we can agree that definitely can we agree on the 4 statewide elected officials? And can we agree maybe to do a list and have a clear understanding of what that agency and we, you know, how that breaks down and how much that's going to impede on your ability to deliver prompt guidance when there is no precedent. So maybe we can get an idea of who those people are and decide who we want to just have review of, other than the 4 statewide elected officials.
Again, what I would like to do, and I don't disagree with codifying in some way for class. I think it makes sense for staff to continue what we're doing, which is notifying commissioners all the requests we get that are likely to generate informal letter.
Executive.
Either do that on a more.
Can you just speak louder, because we can't?
Yeah, we can either, we can continue doing what we're doing, we can do it on a more frequent basis. And then commissioners can let us know if there are particular applicants whose requests they would like to review in greater detail. And handle it that way, rather than creating a category, or categories, most arbitrarily. I think, you know, one of the things that's vetted, at least with one of the things that's vetted with respect to outside activity requests in particular, which maybe are the focus of this, but it's true also in post-employment requests. One of the things that staff needs to know is what the individual's job responsibilities and duties were and what they're proposing to do. And maybe you would use those as the indicia of what commissioners want to take a closer look at or be more closely informed about. Try that for a cycle meeting from now past next commission meeting. See how that's working out. And formalize it. Or change it if that's not working. I mean, that's effectively what we have been doing up to now, been keeping you abreast of those kinds of things. And we've created the opportunities for discussion. And we've brought a number of issues to you where we feel precedent is not sufficient to allow staff to generate informed guidance.
Mr. Whittingham, I see your hand up, but I have a question for you first. Or a statement perhaps. Would you be comfortable, and therefore the rest of the committee be comfortable with Commissioner Whittingham's idea? Well, I know you would be because you suggested it. The Commissioner of the Week, somebody on duty to basically take suggestions and push them along. I'm not sure exactly how it would work.
I would not be comfortable with that. I don't see that. I would not be comfortable with that. I would be comfortable with staff. I would propose, if I can, Mr. Vice Chair, I would propose that between now and the next meeting, two things happen. One is that staff getting a sense, this is based on a sense of what I'm hearing today, send all, forward all requests for informal advisory opinions or formal from at least the 4 statewide elected officials to the commission. Just start that immediately. And then make a recommendation to us at the next meeting as to, from their opinions, what other agency heads or related offices should be included in that category. And I would accept that if any commissioner on the informal advisory opinions, of course, all the formal stuff will come to us anyway, but if on any of the informal advisory opinions that we get, whether it's the 4 statewide or others as this thing rolls out, if any commissioner has a question about an informal opinion, then staff make a recommendation about how they handle that. Either they answer that question of commissioner or commissioners and they're satisfied and we move on, or it has to come to the next meeting. But I would be opposed to a Commissioner of the Week making those decisions.
Thank you. Commissioner Whittingham?
Thank you. I just want to, I think we should not kick the bucket down the road. I think every time we've had, I don't want to exaggerate, but no less than 5 or 6 meetings in some shape or form dealing with this, and we can't get it. So I don't want us to wait until the next meeting for the staff to come back to us. We have said that the agencies, this commission, it oversees over 300 plus agencies as we've identified for the purpose of training. So if it's 350, 380, whatever that number is, the individuals who are the heads of those agencies would be included in those that we have to see. That's a defined number. We know how many. I've heard the number before, that this is the number of agencies that we have to oversee. Add those numbers as the agency heads. Now, I understand that there are some commissions that we are in charge of, which may be akin to an agency head. How many commissions are those? I am sure it's less than the 300 plus. I would suppose those individuals, those would probably be the agency head. And that's a limited pool and a pool that can be readily identified. And so that is the pool that I would put it in. And when I talked about a commission of the week, I wasn't saying that commissioner was going to take on everything, but at least that commissioner is seeing it. Everybody would still see it. And that was my position earlier. If a commissioner objects to it or has a question, then yes, if it's reviewed, it is answered satisfactory by the staff and that commissioner is satisfied, then we don't need to go any further. There's no disagreement there. But if it's not, then I think that's where we may have to address it as the commissioners.
May I suggest that perhaps we define agency as authorities, departments, and agencies, and that we include the commissioners, deputy commissioners, and their executive staffs?
If that's what the commission wants to define it as, I was defining it more narrowly. As I said, we have identified over 300 plus agencies that we have oversight. Each person that's named the head of that agency would fall into this category. The other group would be if it's a commission, which is would be akin to it, a commission who's overseeing, let's say, this agency, as I've heard, then how many are those? Is it 50, 100? Those would fall there. And I would leave it as that. I wouldn't be going to their deputies. I would not be going to their councils. That would narrowly define who falls into the category of agency heads and make it very clear.
Just to clarify, I was thinking in terms of an umbrella name for those individuals I just suggested as policymakers. But I see Commissioner Chairman Davey.
No, I was done. I think we should stay with agency heads. I would, if we're going to go that route, and again, I don't think we should, but I will accept it. If we're going to go that route, then I would agree with Commissioner Whittingham that it's just agency heads. And then if we need to add anybody to that, we can determine that down the road. But in order, again, to get on with the business of the commission, state-wise agency heads forward the informal stuff, the formal stuff we get anyway, and then let us opine. I actually think it's going to prove to be impractical, but I'll join my commissioners and my fellow commissioners in giving it a try.
Can I get in the queue, Mr. Vice Chair?
Commissioner Harris, you are next.
Okay, thanks. So just real quick, I don't have strong feelings about who goes in the category. I'll join whatever my colleagues think is best. Just to respond to what Director Berlin said earlier about effectively continuing or codifying the current process. My concern would be, and my proposal would be, the current process, what we get is sort of all of the pending requests for guidance, and we get blurbs. And so I think for me, it's important that for, again, whatever goes into this category that we're identifying, that we get the request so that we can see what the issues are in a fuller way. And I don't think it's very impractical if it's just that gets forwarded with a note that says if any commissioner asks to kick this to the full commission, you have 24 hours or 40, I don't know how long, whatever amount of time you have to do it. And then otherwise it goes on its merry way. But so it's basically just sort of forwarding the whole thing, whatever falls into this commission, to the full commission, and giving people a chance to request that it be raised to the full commission. That would be my proposal, which I think is different in that respect from current practice.
Hey, Director Berland.
Yeah, just to clarify, staff has been calling out particularly significant requests.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
We have been calling out and specifying particularly significant requests that have come in, as well as those that we feel are not governed by precedent. So we've been doing that. So it's not simply generating the log. That's what I meant by.
Well, I'm not talking about.
But I don't think it's different. What you're suggesting. I just want to.
I'm not talking about highlighting the blurb in the log, though. I'm talking about sharing the full documentation that we get or explaining. I mean, the blurbs are quite short. They're highlighted, which is great, but they're still short.
Yeah, and what I meant was we have been doing more than simply generating the log, but I take your
Yes.
point. I understand.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Carabello?
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna, suggest that the same way I would suggest the way it be done is that you, just like you've been doing, when you're ready to send a letter before sending it out, that you give it to us with the backup for this particular, for whatever the category we decide is. And so everything would go as it would, and then we look at the letter before it went out and opine on it rather. We're not looking to write it for you or to get into like the whole nitty gritty. I think just sending around the proposed response with whatever information is pertinent to it. That's what I would suggest how we do it procedurally and practically. Not that you're waiting for us to actually give your do your opinion.
Just out of curiosity, Kavita, Keith, Michael, how many such requests do you handle a week? That would be something that would fall into the category Commissioner Caraballo suggested.
It's on the week.
Michael, what's your estimate? I would tend to believe we get them on a weekly basis. How many? One or two, perhaps, on average, every week?
No
With
more
respect
than that.
to, with respect to either a travel reimbursement, acceptance, approval, or outside activity approval, or a conflict of interest question, or a gift question.
Gift or honorarium.
Gift or an honorarium.
Mm,
5 or 6 times.
So the question
You'd
is,
say one or two a week on the category we're talking about putting in. But
I think it would depend on the week, but that should be approximately, yeah. I mean, some weeks might be busier than others, depending when it's conference
Right.
season or what have you.
then we would agree to respond within, a certain amount of time if there's any objection or any comments or anything that we wanted to add. So you think,
is that something that's practical to do?
We can develop a mechanism. I would just suggest that rather than just as permanent, treat it as a provisional approach, and after a month or two, take another look at it, see how it's functioning.
All right.
and we could do that either way, right, whether it's provisional or not.
Well, my question is just from a procedural perspective, do we need to have an interim policy that we adopt, that we would adopt and recommend to the commission to approve? Or do we merely, based upon our deliberations here, see how it works and come back in a month or so and say, hey, this is great, or not so much?
We could adopt, I think we could, well, I'm going to suggest we adopt it as a staff policy. Commissioners can prove it, assess how it's working, and we make whatever adjustments necessary.
If I might remind the commissioners who are sitting on this committee, I think we heard loudly and clearly last week that nothing of agency-wide effect should be determined by the mere report of a committee, and that whatever this committee feels ought to be the agency-wide policy needs to now be referred and considered by the full commission. That's what we heard very loudly and clearly, and I believe Commissioner Whittingham is ready to second that recollection.
So am I.
And I'll third it. That's what I as well.
That's
Okay,
right.
What I suggest perhaps is we circulate proposed temporary procedure to be implemented by staff and just circulated among all commissioners.
All right. Why don't we circulate it among the committee first, just to give it a quick look and approve it, if that's acceptable to the committee.
Can I just add on that? I'm sorry, Commissioner Whittingham, go ahead if you wanted to.
Go ahead, Commissioner Ayers. I'll pick up after.
Okay. I was just going to say, I feel rather strongly that it should be a resolution rather than some other sort of less resolution-y document. And if you want to put a sunset in it, I don't oppose that. Or if you want to put a provision that says we promise to revisit it, I don't mind that. But this is an issue of very strong public interest. We have the Hogan Lovells report on it. We have a lot of people caring about it. We should act in a way that makes it easy for the public to see what we're doing. And to me, that means we should act by resolution. I don't see any reason not to. A resolution is just as amendable as any other document. And I'm content with whatever sunset or revisiting procedure goes into that, but I think it should be by resolution.
By this committee.
And yes, it should be the full commission that adopts the resolution.
Oh, no. There's no question that the full commission will do it. We're just talking the procedure. Do we try to whip up a proposal, a resolution now, or do we write one up that, where we could edit it and then pass it through to the commission for its June meeting?
I'm not sure what the whip it up now alternative means. I mean, we
have something.
We should be drafting a resolution to share at the meeting, right?
Right.
Yeah, but
We're not going to.
drafting resolution by committee here and now is
I'm
not
sorry.
the preferred.
No, I don't mean we should draft it today. No, I mean.
No, that's what I was saying.
We'll circulate it among the committee members and then.
And then the committee members will approve it, and then it will go to the commission for its June meeting.
Yeah.
You're right. What I was saying was I don't think I would be comfortable drafting a resolution on the fly, which is what this would be.
Oh, good grief, I agree. Yes, indeed.
Okay. Commissioner Whittingham.
Thank you. Agreed that we should get it. Hopefully we can get it to the full commission by June 9th, if possible. And the reason for that is just to give the full commission enough time to review it prior to our meeting. And if we're having any suggestions there before we have to vote on it, so that at our meeting, everyone is informed and we can vote on it there. Now, I am not in favor of a month or two. We're headed in the summer. I really think we have to make some final decisions. That's not final till debt do us part, but doing something for a month or two really doesn't give us enough insight of, is it really working? And what we heard from our director and our general counsel, we heard from Director San and our general counsel St. John, is that these are approximately 1 or 2 per week. Let's give it the maximum of 2 per week. I don't foresee how burdensome that can be. And if it's going to be that, we're not going to know that in a month or two. That's a short window and not enough time for us to fully evaluate whether or not something is working.
Fair enough. Would the committee agree to put in a sunset provision for December 31st? And then we can reevaluate it at the December meeting?
I would be fine with that. I think that's sufficient time for us to see if it's working or not. And have some data by that point to point to if we want to put in a sunset date.
Just don't know that we need a sunset date because we can always
review it.
We can always review it. So at the end, we can agree that we will look at it again in December, and you let us know how much it is and how much of a burden it is.
Right. Well, I view a sunset as merely a bookmark to remind us that we have to do something. And in December, it could be as easy as saying we vote to continue this resolution, without a sunset. But it puts something on the calendar that's going to cause us to put a date on it to review.
It's fine with me.
You're absolutely right. We could do it and, and say November, hey, let's address this. We don't need a sunset date per se, but rather I was looking at it more as a bookmark to, force us to look at it. Is there anybody who objects to that approach? Commissioner Ayers, Commissioner Whittingham?
No objection to that approach. We can revisit it in December. I think that will give us sufficient time to see whether or not it's working, which will be another 6 to 7 months. So I think that's fair.
Okay, good. And Commissioner Ayers?
Yeah. Agreed.
Good.
Circulates.
Commissioner Caraballos has generously suggested that she will circulate something for us. Feel free to speak up to her, or we can, and as we go, put it around in the emails, and we'll share ideas.
So I'll send it to the committee initially until we get it, and then we'll send it to the full commission.
I just want to go back, around since we seem to be winding down now, and just emphasize that this is the commissioners who all came in at the same time trying to get our feet wet, get our understanding, and basically rebuild a house that had burned down. And do it with staff upon whom we rely heavily and trust. It's more of a learning exercise and getting our feet wet exercise than it is anything that the staff should take away and say they don't trust us, they don't believe in us. That is absolutely not true. We would not be where we are today. And I don't think we would have started to garner the respect that we have without you. So please keep that in mind. Even if you think we're tripping over our toes or tripping over you, our intention is to get it right, not only for ourselves, but those who follow us. And that the legislature will never again have to create a new ethics commission, because I'm not sure how long any of us could survive that exercise. So to the staff, thank you. To my fellow commissioners, your input, we can agree, disagree, but I think we're all pulling the oars in the same direction, and I think that's great. We want to set new dates, a new date for us to meet, or do we want to now, in effect, adjourn sine die to sometime in late November, early December, for the purpose of review of what we have now done?
I think we should have another meeting.
I have a question, Ms.
Sure.
It's convenient.
It sounds like now's the time.
So, okay, great. My question is that I mentioned this in an email. I'm not personally, and I'm the junior member on this commission, so it may be just that I came late, but I'm not 100% clear. I understand the scope of this committee's mission, mandate, charge, whatever, and if everybody else is, that's great. But is it? But my point is, if anybody else is also unclear, then that is something I think we should take up and make sure that the full commission agrees on. My confusion has to do with whether our charge had to do solely with the processes for guidance and outside activities requests, which is what I understood our today's discussion to be about, or whether, Commissioner Cardozo has spoken about the need for a broader contextual look at delegation issues across the commission's operations. And so I just wanted to ask, is it the sense of my colleagues that we're supposed to do that, this committee is supposed to do that, or is that somewhere else, maybe somewhere else to be determined? But like whose job is that broader look at delegation issues across the, because if it's ours, I think we should meet before November, but if not, then maybe November's great.
Commissioner Caraballos?
Yeah, I think we should meet earlier than November. I think there are a lot of other issues. I think this is pretty much, we've
taken a major step.
Delegation issue, I think, and I think it's more, how we're gonna review. I thought this committee was going to look at what we have in place and how, how we might want to change those things, including the plain language changes. I thought this was all guidance, but
I think that was originally thought of, but we're still talking in terms of how that would be. I think in fairness, the idea of this committee has morphed a little bit. It had been for delegation, and now we're focusing on guidance, which I think just from a perspective of, I hate political niceness, but, something along the lines of, a mutual respect with staff. And basically the idea is to look and see how we stay involved with and interact with the staff in an appropriate way so that we feel that what's coming out of this commission is a joint effort and a joint collaboration with the staff in order to establish how we operate, which is a dramatic difference, it seems to me already, from our predecessors.
so you
I
have
hope.
to continue.
So let's pick a date. Just to be clear, I
Wait,
will.
I'm sorry.
And
What are we picking a date to meet about delegation
Other things.
issues globally, or are we picking a date?
right, the delegation issues globally.
Okay, so it is folks' sense that
Okay.
it's appropriate.
Uh,
I guess I would also suggest that we go back to the full commission just to clarify that and have a written charge. I think committees should have written charges, and maybe we do, but if we don't, I think we should make sure before we keep going too deep into this, which is obviously a really important issue and a sensitive one. And so I do think we should meet again soon if that's our charge, but I also think we should go to the full commission and try to get a charge for ourselves.
All right, I will email everybody and what everybody's availability is during the summer.
I agree. I think we need to just make sure we clarify, because I thought that the delegation committee was switched to guidance, which we apparently dealt with today. And so if we're going back and then saying, okay, it's delegation broadly, then we need to know what falls under that umbrella and what we will be addressing. Or we can keep this narrowly and in terms of it being based on guidance and deal with that issue. And I think when we're talking about the delegation, we have to identify what we want to address there and who will that go to. For example, the reviews that we need to do, and that might be this commission, this committee, could be other committees, or the staff, of course, in collaboration with staff. So we don't have that clear at this time.
Thank you.
All right, I believe that the original intent was to review with what we're doing consistent with the Hogan Lovells report, and it's morphed a bit in terms of to go from delegation to guidance, which is why the name of the committee was changed. It's really an offshoot of the legal committee, although we're not all on both. But the idea is to look at the procedures that we follow in terms of accomplishing what we do in terms of guidance to who asks and address in the manner appropriate. And I think we've done that to some extent now with regard to department heads, statewide electeds, et cetera, in terms of how we interact with the staff in terms of guidance. There are other issues. We have the Hogan Lovells report. We have Michael Cardozo's, Commissioner Cardozo's report and suggestions. So we still do have things to discuss.
My request was for a written charge from the full commission.
Okay. I will speak to the chair, and we will come up with something.
Great, thank you so much. Any
other business? I will You'll have an email from me, but in the next day or so for scheduling purposes. Please get back to me as soon as you can so we can schedule it since summertime. It's not always the easiest, but I would like to think that we will get as much as we can done at the next meeting or two and prepare for a final approach.
Terms have to come first.
I would think.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Caravellos. And
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Whittingham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
You're opposed? Commissioner Ayers, you're opposed to adjourning?
Want to stay?
Oh, no, I was voting in favor. There must be a time delay.
Yeah, sure, that's what you say now. We are adjourned. Thank you.